Hi there, welcome to the first What the Haze podcast. First of all, before we begin, I'm just going to let you know how we're going to divide today's proceedings. First of all, I want to talk about my life and a little bit about my travels, go into my writing a little bit, and then I want to talk about why I'm starting to do a podcast. I think that's it's a big question. It's something I've been asking myself a lot recently. Then I'm really going to go into some of the nuts and bolts of writing. So I want to talk about what I consider to be the three basics of writing, which are, writing itself, the act of knocking out words, and then also reading, and lastly, editing. And then finally, at the end of the podcast, I'm going to add a new section, which is going to be loosely titled like something weird and interesting. I'm going to tell my listeners something interesting or something strange, something weird that's happened to me on my travels or in my life. It might be something, for example, supernatural, or it might be a case of, hey, I'm living in this country and this happened to me and it's pretty wacky, and who knows, maybe something similar has happened to you. So first of all, let's go back. Before I want to talk about who I am as a writer, I think it might be best if people understand myself first, and then that you then might understand where the writings come from. I mean, I think I've been writing ever since I was 21. I think my background's probably like most people, in the West, either lower middle class or upper middle class, and constantly fluctuating between the two. More or less a rural background growing up, moved to the big city, fall in love, start writing poetry. Maybe, I don't know if everyone else does that, but that's how I certainly got into writing. The big thing for me that made me who I am is when I was like 30 years old, I decided to make a break, and I emigrated, though I didn't realize I was emigrating at the time, to South Korea. And going to that country had a huge impact upon my life. And then after 2 years there, I went to live in China. I think just the act of living in China, living in South Korea, coming into contact with lots of different people, it's had such a big impact upon me. Because you meet a lot of people, the kind of people that are behind the news headlines, and you realize, just like in our own countries, there's not lots of fortunate people around. If there is a Chinese economic miracle, there's still lots of people that are not, gaining from that. And that drew me on to writing. And when I went to China, I got my first big idea for a novel, which is, you can check it out on Amazon. It's called Jack Strong and the Red Giant, which sounds like it's about a fantasy novel, which isn't. It's the Red Giant aspect is a red giant star. It's what you would class as middle grade children's, young adultish fiction. I think the boundaries, certainly the boundaries of those genres, I think can be blurred sometimes. And certainly when I wrote that book, I think I intentionally blurred them. And that's about this young boy from a fictional town in the UK who's getting bullied, he's unhappy in his life. And then he gets kidnapped by this alien spaceship. That might sound a bit strange. How can you get kidnapped by a spaceship? If you read the book, you'll understand what I mean. The spaceship itself kind of chooses him, and it chooses these other alien girls and boys. And they have to come together and work out, hey, well, what is going on? Why are we here? What's going on? And there's a larger plot at stake. And it's about him finding his way and his journey towards being this shy, bullied boy with no confidence to a boy with a lot more confidence based upon his experience. And this is where to understand my writing, you've got to understand my travels, because a lot of this comes from my travels. You're constantly finding problems and issues that you've got to deal with. You know, I didn't explain this. I'm in Korea, I've been in China, and I'm a teacher, English teacher. You're working, you're always encountering problems. There's always cultural issues in almost every school you go to. Even if it's the best international school on the planet, you're still going to find cultural issues abroad, and certainly in China, that is the case. And so, yeah, that bleeds into my work, and you get these characters, such as the main character, Jack Strong, who has to, encounter these issues and overcome them. I also, when I was in China, I started doing a master's degree in creative writing. And it's something I would encourage any aspiring writer to do. I'm a big fan of master's degree in creative writing. But don't get me wrong, they're not like a panacea to publishing. I think a lot of people do master's degrees in creative writing, like I did originally, and expect, right, and I'm going to get published now. I'm going to make it. It doesn't quite happen like that. It should do. Don't get me wrong. I think that's one of the faults of the university system, or maybe it was just my university. I don't mean to knock them. It's a very good one, Manchester Metropolitan University, but I think it can still work a bit like an exam factory where you get a cohort of students every 2, 3, 4 years, depending on the length of study. And you feel very special and very valued by the university in that time. And you do learn a lot. But at the end of that time, it's like, beep, someone press the escape hatch, you're gone. The next set come in, and they're the special ones. And I tend to believe in, if you've got a friend or if you've got a student and you think is really talented or at least deserves a platform. And I'm not so much speaking about myself now, I'm speaking of other people that I've known have done that course, and there's probably others from other universities. If you know people like this, surely as a writer, as an academic, as a creative person, it would be your responsibility to ensure that that person gets, the largest possible spectrum of readers listening to them. And a lot of writers that do it, beyond their own writing and learning how to improve their own writing, they know nothing about the publishing world. And you learn a lot of that by sending stuff off. But even then, I know more about the publishing world now, but, not very much. The only people who know about the publishing world, I think mostly are publishers and, of course, published writers, but becoming a published writer is such a difficult thing. And it does rely a lot on luck. And it's hard for someone such as myself and another person I knew that did the same course. It's hard for them to know people in the publishing world and agents, for example, and people that work in book publishing houses. It's hard to get to know them when you're living in China on the other side of the world and you're being creative and you're pumping out stuff and you're sending it away. But unfortunately, it is a cruel aspect of the publishing business, but it's still a lot of it. At least I feel this is true. It's about who you know, not necessarily what you know. And I think that, I do think writers and publishers generally should be actively working to reduce that, because ultimately it's about the culture, the writing culture, the English language culture. And we should want the best stuff to get published because that then reflects into the culture, which then reflects into writing. If we just publish people that we just happen to bump into in the pub, and that's just, my words, then I'm not quite sure we're being truly representative of English language writing culture. So that's my take on master's degree courses. In a further podcast, I'm going to go a bit more deeply into this because I really want to talk a lot more about my experience with that, and I can really look at the advantages and disadvantages, because plenty of writers have come up to me and gone, hey, should I do this course? Or, hey, I'm thinking of doing this course, but it's too expensive, because they have got more expensive now. they've doubled in cost, particularly for international students. It used to be a great cheap way for Americans to do a British course, for example. But now they're all about £20,000, where it used to be 6,000, 7,000, £10,000, which was very good. Anyway, I'll stop talking about that because I really want to go into that in a future episode of this podcast. What I was going to do, I started out, of course, talking about Jack Strong and going into being at the university. And when I was doing my master's degree, I wasn't actually writing young adult or children's literature or any kind of fiction. I actually went there to do poetry. And going to China, being on this course, got me into writing a more urban type of poetry that I hadn't done before. Before that, I'd written, broadly romantic poems. They're all right. I'm not going to say they're rubbish. Yeah, other people might say they're rubbish, don't get me wrong. But I'm still quite sentimental to some of them. And I did like writing them, and they were based to a certain extent on truth. I was walking, for example, walking and hiking around the country, around Yorkshire. But of course, they were very rhymey, very traditional. You'd argue maybe pale copies of romanticism. Anyway, so I go to China, and I just start getting into, writing about these urban settings. I'm suddenly thrust into this other world, and it's really like another world of all these people that are completely different from myself. And China today is a lot more developed, and I've been here like 14, 15 years. It's my 16th year now, so I've been here 15 years. And it is a lot more developed. But back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, you met people that were just from a completely different, way of living, different set of circumstances that they lived through, that, you just can't really, it's hard to emphasize with, because you might say in the West, oh, I was poor when I was growing up. Yeah, not like that, and I remember distinctly, you'd go to parts of Beijing where I lived for the first 7 years of my life there. And you get some parts or some people that, of course, are as rich as anyone on the planet, don't get me wrong, but you can go an hour outside that point, and you would find, subsistence farmers that are as poor and as wretched as anyone on the planet. And then you get like the urban laborers that are still around. Their lives are just ones of toil, hardship, and misery. And I still look at them today, you still see them, and they still persist, and they haven't gone away. Because some things have gone away. And I think poverty has gone away to a certain extent, or severe poverty, I should say, to a certain extent. Poverty is everywhere. Poverty persists. Poverty will always persist, I think. But you get people, I just saw a guy cycling down the street the other day. I say cycling, it's like a cart, and it's, again, I'm from the UK. You might be listening to this in many different countries in the West. We don't really have carts like this. It's not motorized. It's a bigger than a bicycle, but it's not bigger than a car. If I call it big, I'm doing it a disservice. It's a frail-looking cart that you pedal, and I think in one of my poems I called it like the frail bones of a cart, because it feels like that. And the back is piled high, absolutely piled high, with all this cardboard, like a giant pyramid. And the guy's like they're pushing with the pedals, because there's so much weight on the back. Pushing it, through the traffic, weaving through the streets slowly. And he's as skinny as a ghost, really. It's just frail. Any food he eats, and I've seen people like that, and they eat so much, so many calories, but they're doing so much work. It's just burnt off. Probably not in a day, but half a day, it's all burnt off, and the rest of the day they're just starving. And so I wrote about people like that. It was that shock factor. I know like poetry is, we talk about it sometimes, it's like, great emotion. And I suppose shock is emotion. We don't necessarily think of it that way. It's something that happened to us. And yeah, we go, oh, feel shocked. I think a lot of time we think about great emotion as like, passion. Like, oh, I feel so passionate about this scene, or I feel so, I'm motivated by the fires of injustice. But yeah, it was the emotion of shock. Like, oh my God, there are these people out there. And I had to write about them. And so you always get in my poems, which are, by the way, sonnets, this sense of the other people who are not far away from us, but they're all around us. And this sense of, dichotomy. You get these loud, jarring images and sounds. So there's a lot of, in my sonnets, like a cacophony, but there's a lot of comparison between maybe a glorious sunset, maybe some beauty of nature that sneaks through this smog covered, it's like urban wilderness. And again, things have got better in China, but 15 years ago, I never saw a separate cloud for my first 4 years in Beijing. It's absolute. I mean, that's if that's not dystopia, I don't know what is. And I remember I went to Canada after 4 years, just on holiday to see a friend, and it wasn't a sunny sky like you think, but it was like, it was like a grayish, overcast sky. And I said, wow, everything's so clear, so crystal. And it was a grey sky, but you could still see individual clouds. I said, oh, wow, oh, really? Really? I've not seen individual clouds for 4 years. And I was mesmerized by it. And even on a grey sky, you could see further than on sunny days, around China, a very occasionally when it's sunny in Beijing. And I live in a city called Chengdu now, and yeah, it's when it rains sometimes. Actually, that's when it's the clearest. When it's sunny, you still get a haze. And so, yeah, I wrote these sonnets, this collection going through Manchester Metropolitan University, and I called it Made in China. And I sent it in, to get for my portfolio, and everything was reasonably successful. But I want to talk about that again a bit in further detail in another podcast. I think it's important, and kind of might be good to kind of talk about what I think a little bit about mark schemes and stuff. And if that sounds a bit like a gripe, yeah, it probably is. But I'd like to be able to give it a bit more of a background than what I'm able to here. But I wrote these sonnets in the collections called Made in China, and eventually I've published it. It's on Amazon, just like Jack Strong and the Red Giant. And it's a collection of 50 sonnets on modern China. Actually, just one more thing, and I was motivated by shock, but it was also an element of reportage. Poetry is reportage. Of course, any kind of writing could be reportage, but if you go on the BBC, there's a great example about China. Actually, it's either the Chinese economy, and if you see pictures, I think a lot of the time it presents this idea of super successful and everything is Pudong. And Pudong is like the business area of Shanghai, those big towers. Then you get the politics aspect. And I'm trying to avoid that on here, so I'm not going to talk about that. But I suppose what I want to say is, China is so much more than this. You've got these urban areas. You've got all this great food and great scenery. And so I suppose, initially I was motivated by these loud, jarring images of the urban environment. Lately I've started to focus more on some rural settings, for example, like the rural poor. So even the rural poor is in this collection. And even the beauty of China. China is such a beautiful country, one of the most beautiful countries in the world. And this is not me being a propagandist. I despise those people. But at the same time, we can, we should always recognise beauty as beauty, and that's the countryside and it's the culture as well. I think that's important to say. And I think the same about America. I think the same about Canada and the UK, France, where I've been to a lot as well. Um, so in short, that's me as a writer. I'd say, I write now. I write a lot of young adult fiction, and when I'm not writing young adult fiction, I switch and I write poems, mostly about China, but not all the time. I do write other things sometimes. It just depends how long I've got, and I'll explain when I say time I've got. I'll explain what I mean later because it goes into that blur, and it is a blur between writing and editing. It's a big blur, I think. So I write a lot of young adult fiction. Some actually are set in America, bizarrely enough, recently. Some are set in fictional UK, a lot of far into the future. Some are in like near future settings where I find that attractive, near future settings, because you can write about the contemporary life, but you can just introduce things that maybe are just a little off, or you can mention something about, since the lions went extinct, for example, which might sound like just a little minor detail, but it can always, in the mind of the reader, raise this idea that we do face environmental catastrophe and we need to talk about it and write about it. I think as well with my writing and my travels, where they interconnect is that I've lived in a lot of big Asian cities. So I went to live in Korea, I lived in Seoul. I'm going to count them off with my hand, just in case I forget one. Seoul, Beijing, Xi'an, Nanjing, and latterly Chengdu. There's 5 big Asian cities. Each one doesn't have less than 4 or 5 million people. The current city, Chengdu, the urban area is like 10 million people. The city plus like the satellite towns and villages is 20 million people or something like that, which is crazy. But all this filters into like a lot of my dystopian fiction. And lots of big urban environments. If you remember, I mentioned pollution in Beijing. That's had a big impact on my writing. I have a lot of that. That will often be a subtext to some of the environmental issues that's happened. Or else, I'm writing a book at the moment. What's the title? The title, Dystopia 2.5. I don't have a title thus far. Sometimes I go into books, and actually I know the title pretty quickly. Other times I leave it, I say blank. I've got to save it as something so I don't lose it, or I don't lose it amidst the clutter on my computer. But it's it's an interesting thing. Yeah, talking about dystopia. I've heard some people write about, they take a technology forward or something like that. They write about misuse. I've never been motivated by that, I have to say. I've always been motivated by this idea of what if, and what if problems, issues of today actually expand and maximize and get worse. And lately I found that like in the world, we talk about, wealth gaps. Like the tech titans are the equivalent of, what's it called? The robber barons, I think it was. If I'm inexact with my history now, I apologize. It was robber barons in the 1890s America, the wealth divide. And so a lot of the time, I try to, look upon that maybe in a moral sense, and I look at these people and look at how they live and look at how they represent themselves and look at how they treat others. And that's just today. And I'll try to maximize it. So I'm writing a book at the moment, that book you heard of, Dystopia 2.5. And I've based the bad guy, the big bad, as they used to call it in Buffy, on Steve Jobs, but not Steve Jobs as I know him. I've not read his biography. I don't care to. I don't want to waste my time. But it's just like occasionally what I've heard other people have said about him. Not a nice guy, treating other people like shit. Not wanting to swear in my podcast, but really bad. And I've taken him as someone like him and put him into this future, and just this idea that, and I think it's creeping into the world. A really good example is Elon Musk. You follow Elon Musk. I mean, a lot of people really liked Elon Musk. When I say when he was younger, we're only talking 5 years ago. Maybe even 2 or 3 years ago. And he's just gone completely off the rails. The other day he was at some march in London talking about dissolving Parliament. For what? It's just, oh, because I don't like the people in there. Yeah, that's called dictatorship. Like, and it's like, it's one thing. The mega rich tech titans it usually is. It's one thing them hoarding their money, not paying enough tax, going through tax loopholes. It's one thing that, and that's bad enough. But it's another thing entirely when they start acting like, because they're the world's most powerful, richest person, they have the right to become a modern day tyrant. I say modern day tyrant, like there's no tyrants in the modern day, but just my phraseology. I just find that just utterly bizarre and absolutely crazy, you know. And so, I have a character in this Dystopia 2.5 based on Steve Jobs, and he's killed all of humanity to save the environment, and then realizes he makes a mistake, and he tries to self-correct with another bad thing. Now it sounds crazy. It sounds, oh, that's fiction. But these days, if you gave something very powerful, like a super drug, super bacteria, super bug, into the hands of a tech titan, at the end of the day, we're all morally flawed. I wouldn't trust them to not do something crazy, especially if they believed that they were right and they were the only right person in the world, and therefore they could do what they wish. And I do think there's been a growth in, it's not just tech titans, it's in the media as well. It's important to mention the media. We see this with Puff Daddy and what he's got up to. And it's this idea of developing like a pseudo morality. It's like it's an alternate morality. In the past, people would get caught, at least I believe they would, and go, right, sorry, governor. Yeah, I'm guilty. Sorry. Fake apology to people, whatever. And they get a few years in prison, get released. Oh, God, got caught. These days, I find people defend themselves and act like, well, it's my right, and then they come out with something bogus, like, oh, it's because I've got Asperger's or ADHD or whatever, fantasy syndrome is, passing the rounds. And I know it's veering into politics and some people won't agree with that, but there's this man in the UK who's on UK MasterChef, and I don't watch stuff like that. Although I'm quite partial to Gordon Ramsay's MasterChef, but I don't watch UK MasterChef. And, he was doing lots of things he shouldn't have been doing with staff and contestants. And if I'm inaccurate with that bit, but he's done a lot of bad things. And instead of going, oh, I'm so sorry, oh my God, I've messed up my life, I'm so sorry, can I do something to get back onto TV and get back into the money? No, he just says, no, I've got ADHD, I'm being persecuted. And it's just that kind of, it comes from, that's like, it's a new pseudo morality where some people believe when you get to the top, you can act and treat people as you wish. And it is a kind of slavery in that sense, a moral kind of slavery. And I like to believe that, God, if I did something like that, why would I do something? I wouldn't. But I'd like to believe that I would have the moral integrity. But if I had the moral integrity, why would I do it in the first place? But anyway, I'd like to believe I'd hold my hands up. But I think so. Going back to dystopia, this is where it's coming from. These bad guys that they have these alternate moralities. I'm going to write a book soon on about Mars. I'm about science fiction. I haven't really. I love a lot. I say I mention like young adult and stuff, but uh, a lot of it's genre. I love science fiction. Love it. I can't talk about it enough. And fantasy as well. I just think I tend to think the more I've read about it, though, I think fantasy at its very best is absolutely fantastic. You know, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, just absolutely fantastic. You know, high quality literature. I mean, George Martin said about the Lord of the Rings, it's like the highest point of English literature. And I know there's going to be people out there going, oh no, oh no, excuse me, I'm a Pride and Prejudice man. Um, you know, I'm not knocking Pride and Prejudice there, but you know, Lord of the Rings, yeah, well, fantasy gets to the very top. I think it's fantastic. The other thing I'll say is when it's just average fantasy, maybe it's like every book, when it's just average or maybe above average, maybe just very good, maybe just good. I don't think it's quite as good. It's not as unique and it's not as special, but science fiction, probably the same in some ways. I don't know. I've just read a lot of like American science fiction. Was it from the 50s and 60s? I'll name one book, The Man Who Fell to Earth. I mean, you know, I can't remember the author now, but I saved it on my Kindle, and that's just one of the best sci-fi books. I think it's one of my favorite books of all time. And we're going to go into that a bit later in the reading section. So yeah, science fiction. So yeah, I like writing about science fiction a lot. I've written about Mars, and I'm going to write about another book about Mars. I don't know. There's something about it, isn't it? It's the big other, isn't it? In space, it's the other that can be not the other. It's the other that can be the familiar, and I think that maybe is what fascinates not just myself but lots of writers around the world and across time. And again, going about these tech moguls with their alternate moralities. Yeah, I'm going to place Elon Musk there because I was like, you know, Elon Musk wants to send a bunch of people to Mars. Look, I think it'd be great to go to Mars. I know people diss it, waste their money. Oh, who cares? But I'll be honest, if Elon Musk is with that 100 or 200 going to Mars, he will be their absolute tyrant. He will end up where he will expect them to worship him as some Christ king. And that's going to be in my book. And again, I listened to a podcast recently. By the way, if you can hear me, any kind of noise on my podcast, I'm recording this in a spare bedroom in my apartment in Chengdu. And I was cross-legged and I just had to stretch. So if you do hear the odd creak, that's where I'm recording this. My wife and child are in another bedroom, so I don't want to wake them up. So I've got to record away from them. So yeah, that alternate moralities. I try to get this into books, into my fiction, and explore these, how they can, you know, these emergencies can get worse over time and can blow up literally in our faces. And I suppose the message, and there's always a message in my books, there's always an agenda, is about how we need to therefore deal with that in this time. And that doesn't mean put someone like Musk in prison. It just means we need checks and balances. That's the American constitutional cliche, checks and balances. But we do need them in life in general, you know. Okay, I think that's enough about my writing and where I've come from in my life. And by the way, if there's anything I've said and I've not said enough of it or not given it enough of an explanation, in any of the forums that this is posted on, drop me a comment. You can ask a question, tell me more about this. I even wouldn't mind at some point in the future having a whole podcast where I can answer people's queries. It could even be about writing, editing, reading, because I've encountered quite a bit, not just in terms of like traveling and living abroad, but different aspects of writing and that have come up and stuff. And what do you do when you get a 1-star review? Thank God that Amazon don't have a 0-star review, because they'd have done that too. Not that my book's like that, but you do meet people that are vindictive. By the way, Jack Strong and the Red Giant, I mentioned about what it's about already. The average rating on Amazon is 4.3 out of 5, which is very good. I think you'll enjoy it. It's about, how many words is it? 76,000 words, which, by the way, is my longest book. More about that in the future. Made in China is 5 out of 5. There's only 2 reviews though. So that, talking about those 2 neatly, allows me to go into the next segment of the podcast, which is why podcasting? Why now? I mean, I probably everyone listens to Joe Rogan at some point. I don't religiously listen to him. And yes, he is friends with Musk, and I get all that. And yes, I think probably he's gone a bit nuts lately. The best Joe Rogan podcasts are the ones where they talk about Bigfoot and UFOs and ghosts. Those are the best ones. Or when he interviews someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Elon Musk back in the day before he went nuts. You know, those are really good. Most of the stuff I don't listen to, but these days, I get into like writing podcasts. Not that motivated me to do this. So listen, I think, do you know what I'd say is, I feel like I have a voice, and I feel like now is the time to share it. Now is the time where I want to talk about not just my writing, but writing in general. I think I want to communicate more with people around the world. Living in China, living in Chengdu, there's not much of a writing community here. There was one in Beijing, and I was part of that for a while. But I think we are becoming a more digital civilization. I mean, AI is changing the world, so maybe this is a representation of that to a certain extent. I think. Do you know what I think as well? I think I'm a good writer. If I'm not broadcasting that enough, I apologize, but I do think I'm a good writer. And listen, at the end of the day, it is up to the reader, always. I'm very wary of when I listen to writing podcasts and there's a writer being interviewed, and they have that bit where they start talking about their writing, and they do it in a very positive way. Well, it's understandable. We should all think our writing's good, but I am a big believer in, I think it's really good. I think it's excellent. I think it does this. But I like to say it's ultimately up to the reader. Whether you've just written your first sentence, or whether you're, a published writer and you've published 100 books. At the end of the day, it's up to the reader, because they're the audience, they're the jury that matters. But I do think I'm a good writer, and I feel like, and I've written, how many books have I read? Sorry, how many books have I written? I have to count them. It's about 12 or 13. But I should say that I mentioned Jack Strong and the Red Giant. It is part of a 5-book series. I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier. It's part of a 5-book series. Jack Strong and the Red Giant, Jack Strong and the Prisoner of Hadrath, Jack Strong in Dreamland, which is a euphemism for Area 51, Jack Strong Dark Matter, as in actual dark matter, and it's also a series. And then finally, Jack Strong and the Last Battle. Those 5, so it's 5 books out of 13. And so I've written, what's that, 6, 7? I'm really bad at maths. There's a reason why I'm a writer and not a mathematician. I'm terrible at maths. So yeah, about 6 or 7 standalone novels that I'm always trying to get published as well. Published and get an agent, and that's always the big trick. But I think I'm good at it. I think I'm competent at it. And I think, therefore, and that's also where I feel like I have a voice, I think there's a fine line between the published writer these days and the so-called amateur writer. I think we're all amateurs, That's another thing. I don't think we're all amateurs. What does that mean? And so I'm a teacher, an English teacher, and there might be some English teachers out there listening to this, or there might be other professions that understand what I mean by this. This idea of a growth mentality. And you need that to be a really good teacher to go far and to stay in the game a long time. You need a growth mentality. But I do think a lot of writers, published writers, forget that. And they just, in the end, pump out whatever. And it's, for me, it's not quite the same, not quite good enough. And we have to remember that we can all still learn from other writers and from experiences. And yeah, I just think that there's published writers out there that just say bum, 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 bum. They get so used to the deadline, bum, 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 bum. That's kind of all they do. And, amateur writers are no different in some ways. We all need to improve. And what separates us, I think, ultimately is just that bit of luck, knowing the right person. That's not bitter. I'm not saying it in a bitter way. Like, I wish I knew the right person. No, I just think that at the end of the day, you need to know people, and that helps. And I mentioned amateur riders. Like, I'm sure there's podcasts that are coming up on my YouTube these days, talking about 7 mistakes that amateur writers make. Listen, published writers are making all those too. The difference is they have an army of editors and agents and publishers that are checking on them, advising them, and weeding them out. Not to say there are no bad books out there. There are. I've read a few. But yeah, there's a thin line between the amateur writer and the published writer, the professional writer. So I don't see why it should only be podcasts on YouTube. Not YouTube's fault, by the way. It just seems that way to me. That are by professional writers. And this is why it's a big convoluted issue. So if this bit sounds a bit mixed up and a bit jumbled, it's because I think my mind's a bit jumbled about this. It's these fine lines. And I feel like, am I an amateur writer or am I an experienced writer? Again, it depends upon your point of view, and I feel like I know enough to talk about it. But of course, somebody could go, but you've not been published. I've been published in small magazines, plenty of small magazines around the world for my poetry, so there. But yeah, other than that, I think that I have a voice. So I have a voice. I feel like I have a voice. I feel like, and this is the point I'm trying to get to, I have an expertise. I have an experience that is constantly happening right now. It's still alive. And I want to transmit that to you, the listener. And I want to, and if you're sharing similar things to what I'm going through, maybe it will help you with your writing too. And your, not just the writing experience. I think it's a big thing. We're not just, to say we're writers, we're writers, 1 or 2 hours a day. And if you include reading as part of the writing experience, it could be 3 or 4 hours a day now. But the rest of the time, we have these other lives and these other experiences that, don't get me wrong, they feed into writing. But maybe sometimes, we have doubts about that. So yeah, this podcast, I suppose, in that sense, is for you, not just for me. It's for you to kind of understand there's someone else that's going through what you're going through. And again, if you have questions, let me know. Another reason why I have started this podcast is because I do want to get published. I do want to get an agent. And I've been so close with agents in the past. Like, you're getting personal replies months later. They'll say that they like the book, like my writing, like the idea. Usually it's one of those 3, but you're not right for my list. What? Like, it makes no sense to me. Like, if I was an agent, see, this is what I don't understand the other side of the fence. You see, if I was an agent, if I was a publisher, and I read something and go, "Oh, I like this," and this is me as a reader as well, by the way, because writing is also reading. If this is me as a reader, well, I want to read it. I don't read it and think, "Oh yeah, but will other people read it?" I think they would. I like to think that other people, share my tastes. That's what I think is bizarre. You understand? There's an illogicality to it. So if you're an agent, publisher out there, if you have books like that, publish them, represent them. If you like the writing, if you like the idea, it's odds on, absolute odds on. There's other people out there that will feel the same. And there's enough of other people out there that will feel the same. I really believe that. And don't get me wrong, editors and publishers. So editors, publishers, agents, I'm not on your side of the fence. I know you'll probably say, "Oh, well, business decisions." I get all that. But I still think if you like an idea, if you like writing, other people are going to share the same thing. I can get it from an agent's point of view to a certain extent, and I hope there's some agents listening to this. I really do. 2 reasons. Number 1, represent me. The second reason would be, I understand why an agent might reject people. Like, I forgot, I can't remember the name now. There's been a few that have rejected me recently. It's come very close. And it's always along these lines, like I said before, we like it, but blah, 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 blah. I do get it. If the agent, their time is finite. So I don't get publishers, but I do get the agent's point of view. Your time is finite. You might have room on your list, say 15 authors, right? And you've got 14 and you're looking for one more, and you read a book or you read the sample chapters and you like it, but not enough. And you're thinking, but is this worth my time? I do get that. I do get it. So if you're listening, I understand your point of view, and I'm trying to kind of fill in the blanks here. But at the same time, it doesn't help me. But at the same time, I don't know, you take a chance. Take a chance. Just call ABBA. Take a chance on me. Take a chance on someone else. Take a chance on someone else that maybe does something just a little differently. There is something about copycat, in publishing at some point. And I should write that idea down, because I think I'm writing down some ideas on my phone for future podcasts. I've got quite a few ideas written down. But there is a copycat nature to book. I don't think it's a new thing. I think it's been going on for a while. I don't want to get into naming names, but like detective fiction in particular is full of it. And I mean that in both senses of the word. I think a lot of it has become very, very, very genre. I suppose, very genre, very, very typical of its genre. Maybe, but it's probably because the reader's buying it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't write detective fiction. I'm saying do, but do it a bit differently. Maybe I don't want to name names, like I said. If there's one book that's screaming in my head right now, it's Jack Reacher. And I don't want to start saying Lee Child's a bad author or anything like that. I don't think he is, actually. He's actually been a bit of an influence on my writing, actually, on my language, actually, and my punctuation. The way he starts some of his sentences are really good. And I call them like clipped sentences. Instead of like Jack Reacher would say, see, we're going off in a segue now. Maybe that's what we should do more in podcasts as well. But like Lee Child, he'll have like parts of his books. And instead of saying like, I can't remember for the life of me if it's first person or third person right now. But in saying like, Jack opened the door, usually it's like an action scene, Jack's running down the stairs, panting heavily, blah, blah, blah. Instead of saying Jack opened the door or he opened the door, he says, opened the door or shouted, not he shouted. And I call that clipping, and clipping out these pronouns, pronoun clipping. But you can probably do it in other ways. And I think Lee Child as an author does that really well. And I think he writes action really well. And action is not a thing that we should be ashamed of or steer away from. Goodness knows there's enough action in my books. But what I would say is about Jack Reacher is, I think it's there's so many of them, and there's a lot like that, and it's not the only one. And it's like 50 books. What's the other writer? James Patterson's another one. And it's like you don't need to know which book to buy and in which order. It doesn't matter. I've read 3 Jack Reacher books. I won't read any more. I enjoyed all of them, but they've all blurred into one book in my mind. And that's what started to happen with that genre. You know, these characters, they're all like Byronic heroes. They're all dark in some way. Like, I'm dark. You know, I can't go home because I'm dark. Something bad's happened to me. And it does get to the point where, like, I'm sorry, but nothing's that dark. I'm sorry, Jack. That would keep you away from home for that long. I think with Jack Reacher, I actually feel like there was a missed opportunity. It's in some bizarre ways. It's like Harry Potter without the arc, without the overarching arc to tie all those books together. You know, the Voldemort arc for Harry Potter means that when you're reading book 1, you're looking for Voldemort. Of course, at the end of the book, you're like, right, he's dead now. And then your mate tells you, no, he's not. You know, there's something else in book 2. Oh, is there? Oh, and then you start to realize, this Voldemort keeps coming back. Maybe there's something more. And I've always thought about Jack Reacher, you know, instead of 40 books, make it 7. And have something overarching that slowly crops in each book and gets larger. But look, it's not fair of me to tell other people how to write, what to write, because that's not Lee Child. You know, just like I wouldn't like it if people say, oh, hey, I think your Jack Strong books should all be loosely tied together and not tied together. You do need for my Jack Strong books to start at number 1, absolutely for sure. I'm trying to think how we got onto this. I think this is the beauty of podcasts. You can just go down these rabbit holes. It was about agents and publishers and editors, and it was about why podcasting and why I'm looking for an agent and why we should be, why I would like to be, listened to, such a whining way of putting it. Listen to me, please. Please give me some. But I do think agents and publishers generally should be looking for other books that are just a little bit different. You know, I'll give you an example. I was once told, I think it was J.K. Rowling's agent. So if you're listening to this, and I can't remember. I know she's had 2, and I can't remember if it was the first one or the second one. I think it was the second one. I think it's the Blair Partnership. And I could be wrong, but I think it was them. And they said to me, we really like your book. This is Jack Strong. But, quote unquote, we don't think kids are interested in science fiction right now. What? Yeah, they are. Like, all kids are interested in science fiction and probably fantasy too. Across all the decades. I don't care what decade you pick, what age group you pick, or at least I get it that not every single child is, but enough of them will be interested in science fiction, and kids like them, by the way, going into space. Enough of them really will, want to buy that book, and they will believe that they're Jack Strong. They really will, and it's a believable hero. Almost makes me want to talk about Alex Rider. I will resist the urge to talk about what I think of Alex Rider as a character. But it's yeah. So that's it. Podcasting. There we are. I want to get an agent. I want to get published. I have a voice. I believe I'm good enough. I believe that I want to help or communicate with, interact with, however you want to verbize. I want to communicate with people. I want to interact with people. I think that other people around the world are going through similar things, and it's not their fault. It's not their fault that they're living in a hut in Alaska and there's no writing community there and there's no publishing community. People shouldn't have to, in the digital age, migrate to New York or London or Manchester to get published. I do tend to think that if that happens, if that persists, you're going to get a certain type of people published. People that are more mobile, might be wealthier, or they might be more attention seeking. They might have talent, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they don't, but they also might not. And again, I will repeat what I said before, that, our language, the books that are published, represents our culture. So the stronger the books that are published, the better our culture will be, or our language culture. You can use those interchangeably, I think. Right, I think now that perfectly brings us on now to the next and final sequence for the podcast. Writing, reading, and editing. Now, these are the three basics of writing. Now, don't get me wrong, there's other things that will influence writing, such as living abroad, traveling, but that's for a future podcast. I don't want to get into that because it's not going to be part of everyone's experience. Every writer should be basically this: writing, reading, and editing. Now, I'll go back. Let's start with writing, because this is the big one. If you've read books on writing, if you've listened to podcasts on writing or interviews with writers, and publishers and agents and whatnot, there's obviously a bit of debate in this. It seems very simple, a very simple topic, but it's actually there's quite a wide spectrum to it. So, I'll give an example, like, how many words a day should you write? Stephen King would say 2,000 words a day. I can't remember, he said 2,000 words a day for the published writer or amateur writer. But then J.K. Rowling and George Martin write 300 words a day, but I'm not sure if they're editing as they go. But even if they're editing as they go, it takes like probably 5 minutes to edit that. It doesn't take a long time. George Martin, as far as I'm aware, has editors editing for him constantly. Now, I'm going to get into that later in the editing section. And if I'm wrong about George Martin, if George Martin is listening to this and I'm wrong, I apologize. But I got that from an interview. That's with George Martin. I hasten to add, that's what I understand. And then you have Hemingway, absolutely great writer, said people have been telling him these things, like probably something like this: you're not a writer if you don't write 1,000 words a day, blah 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 blah. And Hemingway, in his book, it's called A Movable Feast. I really recommend that book if you want to know a bit more about writing and the writing experience. Where it's also a bit of an autobiography, and it's interesting because it gives you the window into certainly the life of a writer, but the life of a traveling writer. Whereas a lot of writing, how-to books, like Stephen King's on writing, which is very good, by the way, they neglect the life side. And because Hemingway puts it in, you understand like the other pressures and the other things that are going on around you. And you might understand that some writers maybe can just write 5,000 words a day because they have, maybe their life is completely settled. But yeah, Hemingway said he would feel that some days he would just about be able to write a paragraph Now, of course, one person's paragraph is another person's short story. And I think Hemingway can write some long paragraphs. And so his long paragraph might be 300, but I can honestly see Hemingway in a cafe in Paris, sipping on, was it vermouth or whatever, just about getting a 4 or 5 sentence paragraph done in a day. And he would hammer and chisel away at it. He would just, I think Hemingway was, in some ways, was a poet, but he didn't write poetry. He wrote fiction. The way his sentences sound, where they're constructed, there's a lot of deliberate choice in that, in a way that, I think a lot of poets actually do. But yeah, so sorry. When it comes to writing, I think there's a large spectrum. You've got the lower end, like Hemingway, Rowling, Martin, 300 words a day, 1 paragraph a day, 2,000, 3,000. I think it's up to you. I write, just so you know, at the moment, I'm writing for about an hour a day, and I write about 700 words a day. So I'm between the two. I think what's more important actually is that you're regularly in contact with your writing. Most writers tend to agree with this actually. I think you need to be writing 6 or 7 days a week. I think 5 is actually too few. I think it depends on the person. If you've got a great memory, for example, you can write for 3 days solid and have a 4-day break. Then you go back into your writing and you're still remembering what you wrote and what was happening. Then maybe it's fine. This is never part of like the writing how-to thing, which slightly annoys me, is a lot of writers, they base their opinions on their own experience and they forget that other people are not like them. Other people have different memories, for example. Other people have different experiences, different ways of doing. Other people from different generations, and they're accustomed to different things. And just this idea that this is my writing experience, and therefore now this is scientific, is absolute baloney. So I know baloney is like one of those old American words. I'm starting to use that again. Baloney, and needs a bit more. This can go back into doing things like master's degrees, whether it's in creative writing or literature, because you can then kind of, when you get some like writing advice like this, you can really analyze it and kind of pull it apart a bit and realize that it is baloney and hasn't really been thought through by the writer. And I'm really gonna, shortly, when talking about writing, gonna jump into this and hammer some advice that not I've been given, that other writers have been given, are giving. And I'm gonna call them out, even though I think they're good writers. I think it's fair enough, because I think there was one girl in particular, if she was smart enough, should have realized who she was when listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, and she was called out and judged. So I will make, what's what I'm looking for? I will do it. But yeah, so writing. I think you should be writing, in summary, most days a week. I think you have to, at the end of the day, if you're writing 300 words, 500 words a day, you're finishing, you're getting 70,000. I'm not going to go on my calculator and work out how many, but I've done it before. It's about 70,000, 75,000 words. I write about 700 words. A lot of my novels tend to be, they're in that fine line between novella and novel. And I do write for younger readers, so I think that's acceptable. I don't want to start talking editing just yet, but it's going into editing, so I'll leave that. But if you write enough words a day, you will produce a good work of fiction in about a year. And it takes me about half a year, 4 or 5 months to write a novel. And then I take a break for about, it usually depends because I'm a teacher, so I get a holiday. It depends when I'm writing. So if I start writing in September, I finish the book around December. I have a holiday which provides me with a natural break from my writing in January or February for about, depending on what school I'm at, could be 2 weeks, could be 3 weeks, could be 4 weeks. So if I finish a novel in December, I stop writing, of course, so I stop writing the fiction. And then what I do is I pick up my pen and I'll start writing poetry. Poetry are my short stories. Other people, I know Stephen King, for example, when he finishes his writing, he leaves it for the time being. For about 6 weeks, I think he says. Yeah, I'm broadly the same. The longest I've left it is, I think, 3 months with the current novel I'm working on. And that was more just because I finished it earlier than I thought. I had this big summer holiday and I just left it. And of course, I was writing these sonnets about China in the meantime, and it didn't impact me whatsoever. I think if I left it a year or 6 months, I think it would have been too long, to be honest. Obviously, if you can tell now, we're veering into editing. I want to just avoid this, but yeah, if you write, a few hundred words a day, you get your novel finished in about a year, maybe 600 words. Sorry, 6 months, which is great. This is the bit I want to talk about. This is I think it is a big debate in the writing community. And you've got older established writers and you've got younger up and coming writers. How do you write? Do you write on a computer, a laptop, an iPad, whatever you want to describe it, or do you write in a notebook, which is obviously very traditional, very old school? I heard Chuck, I can't get his name right, Chuck Palahniuk. He was on Joe Rogan, and this is what I don't want to get into, naming writers and calling them out, which of course is what I'm doing now, unless they've called other writers out. Neil Gaiman did the same thing. Now listen, I haven't read anything by Chuck Palahniuk. I can't say if I like his writing or not. I really admire Neil Gaiman as a writer. Obviously, as a person, it sounds a bit dodgy, and that's going to be another podcast. I really want to talk about that. How we have to separate writing and writer. And I really admire Neil Gaiman. I really do. But he said the same thing, and they both said, it's not real writing. You're not a writer if you're writing on a computer. You're writing your novel or short story on a computer. And I'm going to use that word again. It's absolute baloney. Absolute baloney. I respect both of them for what great careers they've had, in writing, and the influences on the English speaking culture is absolutely fantastic. I can't say that enough. But to pass comment on people that write in computers is entirely without scientific merits. How do you codify that? How can you decide whether writing on a computer is bad or unproductive or whatnot? That's what I don't. How have you got from, it's not A to B, how have you got from A to F? What's happened B, C, D, E? Now, Neil Gaiman, for example, said that he writes in a notebook because he can, after he's finished writing, he changes things. He rewords things. Maybe he practices how the words sound. People don't do that writing on computers. I do. I bet. Okay, I wouldn't use the word bet. I bet I change as much as Neil Gaiman. So, do I write on a computer? Yes, but this is the weird thing. I'm on both sides of the aisle. I'm the bride and I'm the groom. I write novels and short stories. I don't really write short stories. I've written like one. I write novels and short stories on my computer. Always have done. Why? It feels comfortable. It feels comfortable, and to disprove Neil Gaiman, actually it allows me to chop away at it and I'm editing a book at the moment, and I realized before I even started editing, I'd got one of the main characters wrong. This book I'm talking about, Dystopia 2.5. It, you know, and 2.5, by the way, does not relate to 2025. That would make sense. Now, it was just, for some reason, I've got an Apple computer, and there was issues, and it wouldn't save. I think it's because I was trying to save it outside of the Wi-Fi. Anyway, and so I've had to resave it 5 times. That's why it's called 2.5. And yeah, so I knew that I'd got the main bad character wrong. I mentioned he was based upon Steve Jobs, but originally, I don't know why, I was writing it. And I was like, it's a robot, it's an AI. And between finishing writing and starting editing, I realized that's completely wrong. It sounds hokey. It was hokey. It just didn't work. And so I didn't leave it on my computer and go, no, just leave it. No, just change the odd. I'll change and, I'll change the, I'll change that simile. No, I've just rewritten like almost all of his dialogue and given a completely new backstory and written completely new chapters on a computer. And by the way, I'm riding on a rickety bus. In Chengdu, some of the roads are very uneven. I have to chew gum when I'm riding, so I don't get car sick, because I can get car sick very easily. Usually, that's a weird one. Smell set me off. If everyone gets car sick, it's not just because of the motion. It smells like cigarette smoke mingling with, like the air freshener. Ugh, it's disgusting. So yeah, so for riding, I don't know how like riding on a computer is somehow unwriting. And the reason I mentioned Chuck Palahniuk is he mentioned it on a Joe Rogan podcast, but he was passing judgment on I say young woman. I seem to remember a young woman in an airport, and she's taking her time, and she's anonymous. But if she listened to that podcast, she probably could have worked out it was her. That's if she saw Chuck Palahniuk. If she knew Chuck Palahniuk was there, if she doesn't, it could be anyone. But that girl exists. She exists. And maybe someone else has told her, yeah, you're not a real writer because you write on your computer. And she's taken time waiting for a plane. I don't. I haven't. I'll write ideas down, for example. But I've not done that. She's taken her time before the plane, maybe even on the plane, to just go, I've got an idea, or I'm continuing an idea. And she's just hammered away at it and writing on it. And someone else has just gone over her shoulder. He's not even sat next to her and gone, hey, do you know what? This is my advice. I'm Chuck Palahniuk. He's just noticed it and slagged her off later. And don't get me wrong, by the way, the interview with Chuck Palahniuk with Joe Rogan is really good. I really do recommend you listen to it. And it's very enlightening. And there's not enough writing podcasts, which is another reason why I probably want to do a podcast. So that's what I think about that when it comes to writing. You got to find your way. You got to find your mode. You got to find the most comfortable way that can make you the most efficient writer possible. And if that's writing on a computer or in a notebook, so be it. And again, I write in a notebook for poetry. And it's probably just like Neil Gaiman says, if I can really screw around with it. I feel like when I'm typing poetry up, because I've tried it. I've tried to write poetry. Typing on a computer isn't quite the same. Don't quite get the joy out of framing the words. I wonder if maybe it's because as a writer, when I'm writing my first draft, I'm typically trying to get the ideas down. I speed write. I will occasionally edit, only very occasionally, 10% of the time, 15% of the time, 5% of the time, not 20, not 1. I'll occasionally go back and just check, what did I write yesterday? Or, oh yeah, I did. And do you know what? I'll rewrite that paragraph. I'll just quickly do it. And I'm not going to do it seriously because that's for the editing process, is where I get my focus. my first draft, and this is what I recommend for everyone, just get your ideas down. Get your ideas down. Understand it won't be perfect. Understand, like I said before, there will be mistakes. Like you'll write a character wrong. I heard Brandon Sanderson say he doesn't put foreshadowing in. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. I do, but I don't put it all in. In fact, sometimes I put foreshadowing in. I put it in too much. So then when I'm doing the editing, I'm taking it away. Or I put in words that I know I'm going to take out later. Suddenly, then I feel that those words help me. Well, it's another one in dialogue. Those words actually kind of like a springboard. They help me write the next idea. And when I'm editing, I take them out. Again, we're veering into editing here. I think, is there anything else I want to say about writing? Well, yeah, one more thing. This is, I don't want to become a hypocrite now. I was almost going to say always plan. But some writers don't plan. Okay, I plan. I'll give you my experience. What do? I write ideas down, as I alluded to, all the time. I have, and I write them on my phone. Don't hate me, Neil Gaiman. I write them on my phone, and I've got a list of, including poems, just a few poems, 270 ideas. Now, are they 270 good ideas? Nope. Definitely not. And I should go through and edit them. When I say edit, I mean delete them. But even then, I've still got plenty of good ideas, I think. So how do I choose to write what I'm writing? We haven't really talked about that. And I've mentioned about, maybe I've got certain agendas, certain themes I want to explore, certain people in life that I want to characterize in some way. But what I do is usually I get the ending in my mind. I know how it's going to end. I don't start a novel until I know it's going to end. Now, that's not to say the ending won't change in some way, but usually that's how it ends. I've got a flash, for want of a better word, and for example, I mentioned about writing a book on Mars. I know how it's going to end, and I'm not going to mention it on here just for safety reasons. It's a good idea. Now, of course, it's true of Elon Musk, but it's not Elon Musk. It's kind of based upon that. It's going to be exaggerated, and I'm going to write on the butt. Was it all incidences with? Was it all resemblances with people living today or in the past or entirely incidental? However, it's phrased, I can't remember. But I get the ending at the end of the book, and that's how I pick the book. And if I haven't got the ending, if I'm not happy, if it's a bit blurry, I don't start writing, even if I've got really good characters in my mind or written down. And usually I write all these things. I write things down that could happen, should happen, might happen, probably won't happen. I write down characters. Maybe I'll write down to first person or third person. Incidentally, my Jack Strong series, all in the third person. That's how I started writing. I still think it's the best form, the most flexible, but I've started doing first person as well. What was I going to say? What was I going to say about that? I was going to say the reason why I jumped actually to the first person from the third is not because it's better or more topical right now. It is topical right now. A lot more writers are using first person, but I think it's switching back to third person. It was because I believe sometimes as a serial writer, I think that you have to attempt new things with each book you do. And it might be a minor thing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But that's why I switched from the third person to the first person, so I could learn stuff as a writer and become a better writer. And it's boring. It's boring just writing third person or first person or young adult all the time. I've written what you would characterize as middle grade, young adult, and I've definitely written new adult. Though at the time I thought it was young adult, but it was basically, I think new adult is I characterize as more adult young adult. It's braver. It pushes the boundaries, which is also what I want to say is that I think writers, in whatever genre you're writing about, again, it could be detective fiction, it could be science fiction, it could be middle grade, it could be what we might call serious fiction or academic fiction. Whatever you do, you've got to push the boundaries. And the push the boundaries can just be a little bit. It doesn't mean, writing a children's novel and using the F word all the time. Yeah, I'm going to break the rules. Sometimes you're just pushing against it. I read a young adult novel recently called Pine Eye, and the name of the author, unfortunately, left me. And the author pushes the boundaries really well for young adult fiction. There's a little bit, or more than a little bit, of a cult, as in the occult, not a cult. And I think the dad, the adult in the father figure, is that normally he would be like, he wouldn't have a voice, he wouldn't be given like a third person narrative. You'd leave him quite mysterious. In some ways, that still might be okay, but the author gives him a voice, and so he says the F word like 3 or 4 times, and he's always drinking. And I was like, you know what? This is what young adult fiction should be doing more often. I feel at times, and this brings him back to publishers and agents, especially publishers. I feel like it's got very safe. Oh, it's going to be likable. Young children shouldn't smoke. And it's like, young children do smoke. We should not, and I'm not saying we should be in favor of smoking in books, but we have to accept that young people do bad things. And we have to, therefore, should deal with them in novels. If there's one word sometimes that sticks in my mind with, certainly like when I say young adult fiction, sometimes in my mind, I'm putting children's fiction with it as well. Certainly like middle grade to young adult fiction, I think the lines really do blur. Oh, a lot of the time it just tends to be, oh, well, the age of the main protagonist is 12, therefore it's middle grade. A lot of the time it depends on the subject and the language used. And that's not, and a 15, 16-year-old can definitely read it, and a 12-year-old can read Hunger Games. So, like I said, I think that's kind of below. I think those definite categories are a little bit fictitious. I think sometimes that's why it's great. If you send books to agents and they'll get you to tick boxes, but even then you tend to tick, say, young adult fantasy, young adult science fiction. You have elements of both, but yeah, I think typically middle grade and young adult can blur somewhat. Now, again, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there. I find all these subjects so interesting, and maybe this is another reason why I want a podcast. I've no one to talk to about this. I've no one to talk to, and it's interesting. And sometimes I try to talk to people at school, even those people that do like books, that do like reading, that might teach English literature. Just they're not as interested as I am. I'm not knocking them. It's just the way it is. And it's like, I really want to go into this. I really want to go down to these issues. And you watch a podcast, you listen to a podcast, because you can do both these days. But this is just only going to be just a verbal podcast. I'm not going to put my ugly mug on a screen, at least not for the foreseeable future. I like this kind of format. But I do sometimes picture myself being on the podcast. That's part fantasy, but it's also part ambition. And it's like, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I have a voice. I want to say these things. But where were we about writing? Planning. How I plan. I have the ending. So then I've got the idea. I pick the idea. This is what I'm going to do. Okay. And this is what I'm going to do. Even if you heard that sound, there was a little sound of a door clicking. That means my wife and kid have woken up, and I gotta. They know I'm doing a podcast. That's okay. I gotta maybe hurry up a bit, but I'm just doing just doing a podcast right now. My wife, my lovely wife. But I think this is. I want to keep it as a bit of a urban. I want to keep it real. I want to keep it real. You want? I don't. I don't. I'm not going to edit these podcasts. I'm not going to edit things out. I'm wearing a microphone. I think that should be it. I understand that we all have technical issues, or we have to think. We want the clearest possible voice, but I think sometimes making mistakes is good, and I think should be on podcasts and videos a bit more, like losing track of thought and stuff, going off on tangents, like I feel like I've done multiple times. So going back to writing, I picked my book. I'm going to start writing, and I write down the rough narrative. A paragraph, not even a long paragraph. Well, roughly what's going to happen. And then as I start writing the chapters, I plan the chapters out. Occasionally these days, I'll even skip doing that. I know it's okay. I know I'm going to do it, and I just flash write. And I find that's a good way of knowing where to end up, instead of getting lost in what I would call them literary cul-de-sacs, where you end up writing about something and you're like, no, wait, I don't know what's going to happen now. Or no, wait, no, I was going to plan it like this, but this is not going to happen. And you realize, oh no, like I have to maybe rewrite huge tons of the book. And if you've got a very busy life, that can be hard. You might want to get published. And what if that's 5 years down the drain? What if you don't have another 5 years? So I think it's important when you're writing to make sure that mistakes are, the obvious, what we call, obvious editorial mistakes. I could choose that word or that word, or character needs a bit more definition and stuff, but try to avoid it. Try to plan out what you're doing. But at the same time, you don't stick to it. You don't, I might go, right, this character's going to go into a supermarket, he's going to shit everything up, and then he's going to leave, and the police are going to follow him, chase him, or whatever. I don't know, and I write it, and then it's like, it doesn't work like that. I write it, I realize, the character is a bit too timid for this. He's not going to do that. He's going to pretend to do it, or he's going to run away, something like that, or he shoots up the entire place and the police catch him. It's things happen differently, and that's what's supposed to happen. I just think it's good to have a general direction. It's like this: if you're walking up a mountain, you know where you're going to. You're going to the top. But what happens on the journey? You think, I know what happens on the journey. You might go to plan it out. Have a look. I can see that ridge. But on the way up, you see a wild rabbit. You weren't expecting that. You see a wild deer. You weren't expecting that. You stub your toe on a rock. You definitely weren't expecting that. You realize in your backpack, I'd only brought 2 bottles of water. Got to conserve water. All these things are in your books. So I really do recommend that you plan it out. It's not for everyone. If you don't do it, that doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing. You're doing the wrong thing if you're then writing poorly. That's what I would say. I would say that if you plan out what you write very roughly, and definitely not grammatically correct, definitely not in sentences, just this happens, dash, 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 dash. If you do that, I think you're more likely to write a successful first draft. Well, what is a successful first draft? A successful first draft is a first draft that I think you finish and that can be edited without any major, road work needing to be done on it. You still do the changing, like Neil Gaiman. If it says you don't, if you write on company, you still mess about with things. You still change things. You still go, I got a paragraph. How to fix it? You don't. You delete it. Sometimes it's about deleting, editing. I think we're going. So now this is perfect. You've written your book. Now editing. Don't edit straight away. You'll need a break. I think that's really important to mention. Writing takes time, especially when you're living a very busy, hectic life. You do need to take time out and just relax a bit. Now, Stephen King recommends also writing short stories. I didn't do that initially. I've started doing it. I used to just take like, I used to finish writing right up until I was about to go on holiday, and I was just exhausted mentally. And I'd just take 2 weeks off, or 6 weeks off if I was lucky enough and I was traveling, and I would just have a break. If I still do that, and I don't listen, and some writers do it and some writers don't. If I go away on holiday, I don't write. I need the mental break. I've done my writing, I finished my writing, and I need that 2 weeks or a month to just completely relax. And I've got a very busy life as a teacher as well. But as soon as I come back, I want to get back on it. And that's where editing comes in. And editing is one of the most underrated aspects of being a writer. Professional writers that pay other people to do your editing. And I don't mean the final edit, the publisher's edit it. I mean, you're writing, you're trying to get your deadline, and you've got an editor going through it for you. You're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. And I know I said this, people shouldn't say that. You're doing it wrong. And this is why. Over time, it will make you into a worse writer. Editing is part of the writing craft. If writing is, sharpening the sword, making the sword, forging the sword, then editing is just keeping it sharp. You're making sure that that sword is in the best possible condition every time you go into a battle. That is editing. And I'll quote Neil Gaiman on this, and Neil Gaiman is really good advice for editing, and it's making it look like you knew what you're doing all along. If it's a suit of armor, the first draft. I mean, Neil Gaiman says, the first draft is rubbish. I don't agree with that. I don't think the first draft should be rubbish. I think that it should be, like a rusty piece of armor. It's good. There's parts of your writing will be solid as well. You'll be like, oh, that's good dialogue. Oh, that's good. Oh yeah, the story's good, or aspects of the story are good, but there'll be holes and there'll be parts of the armor that are a bit rusty, and you've got to fix that. And you've got to make sure that your writing is in the best possible condition for sending it out to agents and publishers and competitions. I don't really do competitions myself. I read a while ago that some are fixed, to be honest. But it was a while ago. It was in a paper and about how it's a poetry competition. They'd pick the winners. People that do that. I'll be honest. I think you're scumbags. To be honest, I can't be as. You probably think that you're super liberal as well, and you're fixing. These are important competitions, so your mate wins and stuff, and choosing what your mate does. And you're not supposed to see names and stuff, and you're stealing. It's fraud, really, stealing from. Now, I don't know if it happens all the time. I read about it. It happened in the UK. I have nothing but contempt for people like that. It's hard to believe that you're in my community. For me, writing is about honesty as well, both in terms of writing, being an honest writer, and being an honest publisher, an honest competition judge. I think it's really important to be honest in that way. So I don't do competitions, but back to editing, making it look like you knew what you're doing all along. You also have to, and again, I've got this from Neil Gaiman, so I won't steal his words without mentioning his name. It's making it. It's. You also add to it. You add. It's like you add to the world. You add to the world. You add to the characters. You add so that you're making it better. This phraseology I'm coming out of is not that good. In my mind, it sounds better. It's like this. It's like if your first draft is a broth, say, you're adding in, and I think these are little bits now. Not. It's not meat. That's the first draft. It's not potatoes. That's also the first draft. You're adding in bits of spices, maybe bits of gravy to make it better. It's just say you're writing about a dystopia. maybe it might just be a little detail like, there's no fish in the world. And the reader's like, why? Oh, I want to keep reading. Maybe later on they're going to say why there's no fish in the world, or these are the things that introduce wonder. I think that's an interesting point of view in the reader. Wonder. The reader's going to wonder. Reading is also not just about turning the page. It's when you stop reading and you go away and you do your other thing. And you go, wow, I remember that book I was reading. What's going to happen? What about that world with no fish? And that's important too. And if they can do that with your book, wow. So yeah, but editing makes you a better writer. You learn to fix things so that when you next write your next first draft of another novel, and it's something I've realized, and I've written 13, 14 books in this way, I get better at it. I thought that I had to rewrite half of my second, this Dystopia 2.5 book. I thought I had to rewrite the second half. I really did. No, I don't. There's just little bits. It's just little bits that do need rewriting. But the more you edit your own work, the better you get. I heard Jordan Peterson said that editing your own work is good for your brain. Ergo, if you don't do it, it's not that it's bad for your brain, but I want to use some strength. It's for your brain. It's unbrain. You're not improving. So if you're a published writer, it's something I really encourage you to do. You've got into a bad habit. Maybe it's in that world. Maybe it's easy. Do you go to the bar to order a beer if you know there's somebody walking around that will do it for you? I don't, but I think with writing, you have to get out of these habits and you've got to get into editing. For me, editing and writing are the same. The same value. It's like what came first, chicken or the egg. You can go, well, you can't edit without the first draft, but you can't send the first draft to the publisher. And they're so, so vital. And, when I read or listen to read books on writing, or when I listen to podcasts on writing, and when I think that editing is not given the seriousness that I believe it deserves, when I first heard that, I was like, am I doing it wrong? I remember I read Stephen King's On Writing, and to be fair, Stephen King, I should reread the book On Writing. I just found he was a bit unclear when he got to the editing bit. And he was a bit like, yeah, you do your editing. And then he talks about writing these novellas and short stories. And I wasn't sure, is he writing novellas and editing at the same time? I wasn't quite sure. And again, maybe I misread it. Don't get me wrong. And it's a writing book I'd like to go back to and reread. Though I think Hemingway's Movable Feast will be first, to be honest. So there is that. But yeah, you have to, for a writer, you've got to keep at it. You've got to keep editing. It makes you better over time and it improves upon what you do. So at first I was like, am I doing it wrong? And then I realized I'm getting better. I wrote a novel, before this one, which is called Past Midnight. You can't buy it. I might publish it on Amazon or Apple. It's the one I sent out, and I got really close to getting it published. And it wasn't. I understand to a certain extent why it got rejected. It's about two gay boys, for want of a better word, want of a better phraseology, together at a high school, but one of them gets bitten by a werewolf, and it's all about like masculinity and homosexuality and how the two intersect or don't intersect. And it was an exploration of that, actually. And when I read the book, so I wrote the book, and then I go back to edit it, I had to change barely anything. And I realized at that point, I've got in that position because I've just been editing all the time. editing the books. I'm doing it, and I you know, how often edit? Well, not once. I think you edit to the point where, a bit like Oscar Wilde said, where you take out one word and you put it back in again, or vice versa. When you get into that stage, you know it's ready. I think that no novel's perfect, though. You get to the point where reading the book makes you sick, but you know it's as good as it's going to be. I think that's different from when you're sending things out to publishers and they want, say, 3 sample chapters. I mean, you super edit them. I mean, I want to do a podcast on AI at some point. AI and writing. AI can be used to edit books now. I'm not sure if that's the right way or the wrong way. I don't know enough about it to pass comment. I'm probably going to explore it a little bit. I've got AI to write letters to publishers, and I got, for the last book, not accepted, but I was definitely getting more, what am I going to say, more traction. I was getting more personal replies. So I think that's AI is going to help writing at some point in the future, but there's a lot of downsides to it. And again, that's another podcast episode. So editing, it makes you a better writer, undoubtedly. And again, so if you're not doing that, if you're getting other people to edit for you, in time you'll become a worse writer, and it will lead to, I don't know, it could be declining sales. It could be just putting out stock novels. Oh, look at this writer, he's written 50 of the same books. You know, at the end of the day, writing is about lasting. It's about successive generations wanting to read your book. You could be the most successful writer on the planet right now, but no one might be reading in 20 years. I'm in China. No one reads Twilight. No one. Even Hunger Games is starting to fade. Harry Potter, everyone reads it, which is why I'll do a podcast on J.K. Rowling at some point. I said do a podcast, and it'll be part of the podcast. It's really important that you edit and you get into that habit of editing. And you know, another thing you can do, and it's something I do, and I can't, partly because of my life, I can't do it in a systematic way. You can always go back to a book 2 or 3 years later, and I've done that with Jack Strong and the Red Giant, I think, and I made it better. I've done it with a book called Deadfall, which is like a zombie fiction book, which is not available to buy. You can't get it. I'm going to publish it. I've been to publish it on Amazon for 2 years, and this is going to be a separate podcast. I've had a lot of trouble with Amazon and their Kindle publishing. It's just gotten too difficult to just manage accounts. So I'm going to look at Apple Books once I finish the first draft of the novel I'm working on. So you can go back in time, So you go back and you can edit a book several years later, because you've improved as a writer, and you can use the word suddenly too many times, and just delete that. And it's a way of kind of, when you edit the book, so it's best possible point of view, but it's making you a bit sick, and at some point you have to just step away. I think in a perfect world we have beta readers, but one of my problems has always been I don't know enough people that are good enough to judge my work on my levels, or my understandings. You need to know my work to pass comment. You know, though I'm going to do it again. I'd love it if AI could be a beta reader. Then how do you trust AI? That's a whole different, I don't know, barrel of slippery fish. So that's editing. It's really important. Take it seriously. You will benefit from it, not just in making your current book better, but it makes you into a better writer. Finally, the final segment, reading. We're currently at 1 hour and 43 minutes. I thought this might just be a 43-minute thing, to be honest. So we're doing quite well. Reading books. A great writer is also a great reader. As part of that trinity: writing, reading, editing. What do you read, though? Again, people have different opinions. I did my master's degree in creative writing, which was mostly poetry. And on the workshops, we were studying like 20th century poets. And yeah, it's good. It's good to be introduced to 20th century poetry, you know. But I love things like romantic poetry. I love World War One poetry. But all the writers and the professors too, to be honest, they're all just contemporary. And the reason they just want to get published. And so to get published, they want to read, and they're not necessarily wrong, because agents are always putting on their web pages. They don't like say, these are the books I'm reading currently. They don't say Great Expectations. They don't say Wilfred Owen's Anthem from a Doom Youth. They don't even say a TV show. It's all super contemporary novels that they're looking for. So you can get this feedback loop of just reading contemporary novels or poetry, which I don't think is a good thing. I think that, so I'm obviously predominantly a young adult, middle grade writer, new adult a bit as well. Yeah, I think if you're a writer, you should read what you mostly write. So if you're a young adult writer, you should read. This is where I disagree. This is where you shouldn't necessarily read contemporary young adult literature. You should read what is regarded as very good or great literature for young adult. Obviously, the more you read, you'll read books that are like, oh, this is not that good. This is not that good. That happens. But I do think if you're going to read, say, write children's fiction, you should have done a lot of reading in children's fiction. But, and this is where I disagree with the people in the master's degree, I think that you should read around. Why not? You know, you should be thinking about your books. There's many different kinds of influences that should be going into those books. I read young adult literature, not as much as when I first started. I mean, I read like, Harry Potter, his Dark Materials, Hunger Games, what else? Lots of other things currently not coming to my mind. But then this is the thing. I'm a young adult science fiction writer. Right, okay, so I've got to read science fiction. I'll go into a Google. What are the great science fiction books? What are the great science fiction books maybe from 2025 or 2024? And I won't download them all. I'll read their summaries and go, does that interest me? If I think it sounds like a good book, I'll download it and I'll read it. That's how I got into the Metro series. Yeah, Metro series. What is it? Metro 2033. Great book if you get a chance to read that. Which is about these like independent Russian republics in the Moscow underground, or metro, whatever you want to call it, after this like nuclear war, and there's always like mutants walking around. And you know what? The writer, I can't remember the writer's name. I can't remember if he's Ukrainian or Russian, but I can't remember it. I'm not going to look it up. Metro 2033, but it's like he does things different to like an American young adult. It's new adult. I think it's like new adult sci-fi dystopia. And the American version of that, I think, would be just a bit more less esoteric. There's a scene in that book, and again, you notice another segue here. Scene in that book where there's like they're on this like metro like platform, and it's telling the story of this ghost train that goes past, and the people look at him, and you don't know as the reader, is it true? Is it made up? Was it really a ghost train? It's not connected to the plot. I love that. And that scene would never be in an American young adult writer at the moment. Maybe because and I'm not knocking the writer there. That might be just the publishing industry going, well, it's like this, do it like this. It's just about getting the reader reading, blah, blah, blah. It's just about making the money. And I think we need to get into, I do think all publishers, if you're really into publishing, if you're really into editing, if you're really into being an agent, it's all got to be about, yes, of course we want to make lots of money. But it should also be about great literature, and great literature is anything. It's anything. It's Crime and Punishment. It's Narnia. It's Harry Potter. It's his Dark Materials. It's Wilfred Owen. It's lots of things and lots of genres.
Um, and I'm going to dial myself back from this segue now. And yeah, so you've got to. The point I'm making is you've got to, as a writer, read different things because you never know what might go in your book. I'm one of the things I disagree with is research before writing. There might even be two types of writers. There might be research writers and there might be writer writers. And I'm definitely a writer. But this is the thing. I think if you're researching properly, you're reading around, you're exploring, you're going to museums, you're doing all that already. You should be doing that on a consistent basis. That's just the way the idea of when I've read interviews of writers, Times or something, and they're like, well, I was researching the book on the Irish famine for 2 years. I'm like, you were sat in a library for 2 years. To quote Coleridge a little bit, get out of the library, get into the field. I think it's just a bit excessive. I tend to agree with Stephen King on this. He says that, research, you should do that after you've finished writing the book. And he was talking about, it was his book, Mr. Mercedes. I could be wrong. And I've not read it. Where he says that it was about the police or or a police character. And after he finished, he emailed some of the police, probably from Maine, I assume, and asked them, would you do this? Would you do that? And would this happen? Is this realistic? I think they replied back quickly, yes, it is. So he didn't spend 2 years following the police everywhere. He doesn't need to. At the end of the day, writing is our craft. Writing is our business. And we have to keep at it. I think I always picture that writer in the library. What are they doing? Are they writing things down? Are they taking notes? I mean, they're learning, of course they are. But, at the end of the day, if you're writing about the Irish famine, it's always going to be a construct. Do not believe otherwise. It's always going to be a 21st century version of what we think the Irish famine was like. Even if you've done lots of research, your morality, your viewpoint is going to pass into this. And so it's always going to be a construct. I mean, sure, if you're going to write a fiction about it, you should know stuff about it, but what you should be doing this is what I do. Well, I'm interested in the Irish famine or Irish history. I'm reading that stuff constantly. And then after you finish your blog, you can go back and you can check out, is this realistic? Or you could pass it to someone that knows a lot about the Irish famine and they could give you pointers. That way you write more and I think you become a better writer. And, I'm kind of, being a bit of a hypocrite here. I did say that we shouldn't pass judgment, but maybe I'm wrong. That's it. This is the thing. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I have to accept. I could be wrong completely about this. It's just the way I kind of think. I just think you can do a different way. There is a halfway house, so to speak. I think before I finish the podcast, anything else to clear up about reading? Just that. So, the reading does impact your writing a lot. You get your language, you get your ideas. You should read around. I think that covers it. And if it doesn't, if there's something that you want to say, you have a question to ask, you have a point, I haven't addressed something, I haven't said enough about something, let me know. And I'd love to, explain more because it just gives me more things to talk about at the end of the day. It makes it easier for me. I don't have to spend time thinking about what to write on a podcast or larger now. That a lot of that also comes from I'm listening to podcasts, and that's where a lot of my ideas come from. That doesn't mean I'm copying what they say. It means I get an idea, or I can explore this to greater detail. So the final segment is going to be something weird, something strange that's happened to me. So this story dates back to, and there was probably a time in my life I could have told you the exact day and the exact month, but I can't remember now. It would be I went to university in 96. I left 1999. So this happened in the summer. It'll be 97 and 98. And this happened in the town of West Vale. which is in within a larger town of Halifax or Calderdale. I don't quite know. They're all overlapping. A lot of places like that in the world. Yeah, I'm from Greetland. You mean you're from Halifax? No, you mean West Wales. They're all kind of the same. All the same and different at the same time. Anyway, so it was one night. I'm watching TV. I'm sat. My mum and dad have gone to bed. I'm sat there. I was in a house at the time on a street or a road called Rochdale Road. I'm watching the TV. So to my right and all the lights are off in my living room. I'm watching TV. To my right is the window, and next to the window, through the window, there's the road, and then next to the road is my dad's church. My dad was at church there at the time. And then behind that, there's I don't think it's waste ground. I think it's like warehouses and stuff. Anyway, I'm watching TV, and then something attracts my eye, and I see a red light in the sky. But it's like flashing. When I say flashing, it's flicking. Like, if you imagine flashing is quick, but imagine it slow it down. Almost like I think of a butterfly opening its wings. If you see it when it's on like a leaf, it does it, opens and closes very slowly. And it was a red light, like on, off, on, off. And I look up, and I don't know what I expected to see. And I see what's called a black helicopter. Now, people in the UFO community will know about this, and it's called the black helicopter phenomenon. And I'm not passing judgment on that right now. I've not read about that in years. But the idea is black helicopters are seen around UFO sites or UFOs. This black helicopter was in the sky. Now, how close away am I? And as I'm talking to you, I'm kind of turning around and looking up. In the sky, it must be, if I say 100 meters, no chance. No chance. 50 meters, 30. It's completely quiet. Now, what I can see, when I say helicopter, there's the light, and all I can see is an outline of a helicopter. I can't see rotors spinning. It's just an outline of a helicopter in the sky, flashing. And that's it. And maybe somebody out there knows more than me. Maybe somebody out there was, I don't know, piloting it. Maybe it's an alien. I don't know. Maybe you thought out there, no one saw you. Maybe this is before social media. Maybe you're like, oh, we got away with it, guys. I saw you. So there's that. That's it. But it is a wonderful. So I know I've seen something. I know. What do I get from that? I get from that there's more out there. There's something we don't know, whether the governments are doing something we don't know, or there's aliens or time travelers. Whatever happens, there's a question and there isn't an answer, or there's a list of answers. And I think that's quite beautiful. And that's my take on that encounter. Right, this is going to be a wrap, as they say. We're at 1 hour and 58 minutes. Yeah, I thought I might have been doing this in 28 minutes or something and scrabbling around for ideas. But I found as I've talked, I've actually talked and I've segued quite a bit. And I'll be honest with you, I thoroughly enjoyed this podcast more than I thought. I thought I'd be more nervous. I've not been. I've actually felt like I'm talking to a community, actually. I didn't think I'd feel that way. And I feel like my voice is being heard, and that can only be productive. Just a little note on the podcast. How many will there be? How often? There'll be, roughly speaking, once every week or two. I'll be surprised if it's longer than 2 weeks. It might be that if I get days off, I might do, one or two over a 2 or 3 day period, because I've got a list of stuff I want to talk about on my phone. And that's another thing about writing I didn't mention. I'm technological. Hello. I put ideas on phones and stuff, and I put, and plan stuff. I find it really easy. I didn't tell you my age. I said 44. I'm not 44. I'm 48 this year. What am I talking about? Craziness. So yeah, I'm 48, but I'm reasonably. Maybe it's because of my generation. When I go to university, which is late 90s, that's when the internet comes in. That's when we get email. So I wasn't really. I wasn't really. I'm not old enough where, like I was saying, Neil Gaiman and Chuck Palahniuk when I was talking about earlier, they're from like the generation above me. So they got internet, they got social media in their 40s. And I think that's different. And I think sometimes when we come to writing, what you call it, procedures and writing ethos, sometimes we have to remember that, things change. I don't think you could write a book on a phone, but what do I know? I bet there's people out there writing books on phones and doing it really well because that's what they're comfortable with. That's what they're good at. Right, I will end it now. I have to say hello to my wife and child. I have to take my kid to the playground. I say have to. I mean, I love doing it. Just before we finish, I've mentioned it a few times. If you want to support me, if you want to support the podcast, I really do encourage you. Go on Amazon. There's quite a few books on there actually, but the main ones you can look at are Jack Strong and the Red Giant, the whole Jack Strong series. Now, there is a mistake in Amazon. Again, I'll go into what I think of Amazon later, but it might say for Jack Strong and the Red Giant, there's 2 books. There are not 2 books. There's 5. And I've tried to correct it a bunch of times and it doesn't correct. Jack Strong and the Red Giant, Jack Strong and the Prisoner of a Giraffe, Jack Strong in Dreamland, Jack Strong, Dark Matter, and Jack Strong, The Last Battle. That's part of the Jack Strong series about this boy going into space, finding out about himself. It's very much the journey and rite of passage, coming of age, and he has to fight this rising evil galactic force and unite people. And I think it's a lot of fun, a lot of imagination, a lot of alien worlds, a lot of aliens. Say aliens, shouldn't say aliens? Non-terrestrial humans, non-terrestrial people. Let's be more inclusive with our language. And yeah, it's very much a book of imagination. If you're listening to this, well, what kind of a book is it? I mean, it's a book of imagination. Whole worlds are mapped out that are completely different from not just from our own, but from each other. And there's a lot of that. I've tried to use my imagination with technology and create technologies and stuff. And then we got to Made in China, 50 Sonnets on Modern China, where it really looks at, poetry as reportage. They're all sonnets. I'm going to do a separate podcast in the future about Made in China where I can really go into what I'm trying to achieve. Same with Jack Strong and kind of give, when I write something and tell people, well, this is what the meaning is. This is where I got the influence from. This is when this idea was in my head. And this is even what maybe the color of the landscape was like at the time. So please, if you want to support me, please do buy them. It does help me when I approach agents and publishers. You know what? If you're an agent or publisher, wake up! Give it a chance. If you're like, hey, where can I find Jack Strong and the Red Giant? If you're from the UK, get your email. I've sent it to you. But if not, get in contact with me. Hayes Wolfenden. If you want to add me, on Facebook. I think I'm Wolfenden Hayes on Facebook. It switched around for some bizarre reason a while ago. I've not bothered changing it. Add me. But, if you do add me as a friend, if you put like a message so I know who you are and you're not some crazy loon. If you just say like you heard me from the podcast, then please do. And I think my kid's coming into the room. Ha 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 ha. So obviously it's a good time to end things with my kid coming in. He's called Eden. I actually adore him. And back to publishers and agents. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Facebook. Yeah. Just drop me a line. Friend me. Not a problem. I will be posting details of this, you see, on things like Facebook. Maybe X. I'm a bit funny with X and Elon Musk. I don't think it's very user friendly at times. I'll post it in a bunch of places. But yeah, if you want to add me. But yeah, please do let me know who you are. I might yet set up like a podcast group on Facebook. I haven't decided yet. Might do another writing group on Facebook. But yeah, but please again, just to reiterate, Jack Strong and the Red Giant, Made in China, Download it from Amazon. There is a paperback of Chapter on the Original. I wouldn't get that because it's an older version, and I've had problems with Amazon and it's hard to update. I'm planning in the future to do things on Apple, but anyway, we'll see. Anyway, it's been fun. It's been enlivening. It's been educational. I feel that I've known more about myself as a writer just by doing this podcast. So thank you very much. It's 2 hours and 5 minutes, and you've been great, even though I don't know who you are. But please come back next week for the next one. I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about yet, but it'll be fun. It'll be informative. It'll be engaging. So thank you for listening to the What the Haze podcast. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye now. Thank you.